My name is Harry J. McCarthy, and I was in the U.S. Navy.
So you indicated that you grew up, or you were born in Syracuse, New York.
Born in Syracuse, New York.
Did you grow up there?
And I grew up there and went to school there, high school, and went to one semester at Syracuse University. Then I enlisted in the Navy when I was 17. Went to Sampson boot camp in the Navy. Got out in March of '45, just about when time President Roosevelt died. And everybody didn't know who Harry Truman was. You know. And I was assigned to Washington, D.C. Had a very good assignment, top secret clearance. And I was taught by some ensign waves. There was a group of us. And they tried to, they wanted to set up some fleet units for cryptography. Cryptography was decoded and encoded messages. They were top secret clearance. And so my first assignment there for 3 months, I went over to Pearl Harbor. And we had a secret radio station up in Wahiwa. That's on the big island of Oahu. And I worked in traffic analysis. And traffic analysis was before my time. They could determine where an invasion might take place because of the amount of traffic and high priority traffic. I stayed there for about 6 months, and I volunteered for sea duty, and I was lucky I got assigned to the 7th Fleet Communication Security Unit. And which was, I had to get to Japan. By the time I got there, the ship went to Shanghai. So they flew me from Shanghai, they flew me from Casca Naval Base down to Guam, on to Iwo Jima, back to Shanghai. And that's when I took my ship, the USS Mount Olympus, which is a communication flagship. Well, actually, it was AGC-8 was a symbol. And actually, as a group, it was in AG stand for the Amphibian Group Command. And it was actually Com 7th Fleet, and we had several commands on the ship. We had 2 admirals and 13 captains. A lot of brass. That's a very unusual. Usually you just have 1 captain on a ship. But every captain that had a command on the 7th Fleet, you know, it could have been a submarine commander, it could have been Air Corps commander. And so that's why they had 13 captains, plus the captain. So you always had a captain. And that's why the staff was all, it was a command ship. And when we traveled, we used to go every 3 months from there over to Yokosuka Naval Yard, which is over close to Tokyo Bay. And we stayed there for 3 months and go back to Shanghai again.
What did you
Pardon?
Why did you go there every 3 months?
That's what they did. You know. Well, we just started the occupation in Japan. I was involved in that. And the 3rd trip over, I stayed in Japan, and we set up a naval communication, the first land-based communication security unit in Japan. And I was in the occupation of Japan for about 3 or 4 months.
When did that set up?
When was it set up? Sometime early 45. I went in 45. I stayed there about a couple of months, and I had enough points so I could discharge. So I got a ship out of Yokosuka, went to San Francisco, and I went through the Panama Canal up to the Atlantic. Yeah, discharged at Lido Beach, New York. So I was lucky I wasn't in harm's way, you might say. Just the end of everything. But it was interesting.
You said something about some of these meetings.
Saying something what?
You mentioned that you enlisted at the age
Yeah.
of 17.
Yeah.
What made you want to enlist?
Well, here's the problem with that time. They were drafting us at 18. I had high school kids that were 18. They waited to get drafted, and they send them over to Patton's Army, Third Army over in. And I didn't want any part of that. They tell me some of the stories in there. I says, I got good health. I got to go for the Navy. And so I made a good move.
So you kind of had your choice in whether you like, into
Navy?
when you enlisted, yeah, in the Navy.
No, you just went to boot camp. At that time, they couldn't guarantee you anything. You had to go to boot camp, and they give you all these tests to see where you qualified. And some qualified for radio school, or some qualified for yeoman. Just depend where you know. I just happened to be able to spell. We're lucky. And I could type. And they just had to look for somebody that could spell and type. And it was kind of a soft job. It was an office job.
What kind of, so did you do recording work or anything?
The only thing I did there, I didn't send messages. I wasn't a radio man. Okay. So I just did the communication level for the officer in charge. We had Lieutenant JG in charge. And you had 5 people, 4 radio men and myself. And they worked 24/7 on the clock. They always had somebody on the radio taking code or monitoring code. And I remember some of the radio men were taking code. The Japanese were sending code. The war wasn't ended yet when I first got in. And all of a sudden they'd throw their earphones down and they'd get jammed. You know, the Japanese would jam the signals. They knew they were listening to them. So
what would you hear if you're listening to the
are you loud screech? And so it was, in fact, one of the fellows just left for home was Don Hillard, I think his name was. He's practically deaf from that.
Yeah, well, actually, we just talked with Don.
Yeah, Don Hillary. Yeah.
Don Hillary.
And I said, did you ever file for disability? He said, no. I said, well, you should have. He said, well, I didn't want to. Well, because he has a pretty strong handicap, yes.
So how were the messages decoded if they were Japanese messages to be training in the Japanese language, or were the messages?
The Japanese were transferring code in their own language. And the radio men would copy the code. They'd have a wire recorder, and they copy the messages. Then we take these and put them in they had an electronic cipher machine to try to break them down. The time I got there, the code was broken. I mean, they pretty well had a good handle on our code. On that code. They didn't have our code because the Navajo Indians were running our code. There was no semblance of a communication level. You had to have some intelligence when you put anything in code. And they didn't have it. So they interviewed the Japanese after World War II, and they asked them if they ever broke the code. And they said, no, we couldn't break that. But the code we had, the officer in charge would have the code sheets, and they were if the ship sank or something, you had to take those code sheets, and its ECM, electronic cipher machine, was in a briefcase with a pair of handcuffs, and he went down with the ship. He was warned, whatever you do, don't let this machine loose or any part of our code, or any part of our techniques. So it was an interesting assignment. And then after the war, we started monitoring the fleet communications. You know, the captains, we had 13 captains on board. And some of those captains were pretty outgoing, and they'd have parties, you know, on board ship, which was allowed. But on voice communications, they would they'd break the level of communications secrecy and give the ship's name or give something that was out of the question. So we'd have it all on tape. And they bring him in, and the captain listened for 5 minutes, and he said, "I'm guilty." They didn't do anything major to him, unless they violated 2 or 3 times, but they scared her. I think I never heard them do much. I don't know if they didn't get a court martial. I mean, it wasn't a time of war, but if it was a time of war or something serious. And then, that's about it.
What else you got on there? Any other questions?
Yeah, I mentioned that you had some sort of specialized group for top secret things.
That unit was a communication security unit, 7th Fleet, out of Washington, D.C. They had them communication security was all mostly on land-based, Pearl and Guam and other locations we had. And then they started putting them on the fleets. There were some, we were in the first one we set up in the Asian Pacific after the war, or the war was so close to the end of it, I say it was at the end of it, because when they dropped the A-bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, shortly after that the war ended. And but I was fortunate because I did have top secret clearance, and we'd get Liberty over in Yokosuka. We'd grab a Jeep and wasn't too far. We'd run into Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I probably should have been there, but no one could keep me out. And lucky I didn't get any radiation, but it was pretty brutal. I mean, it was flattened, period. Just like a city dump. You might see a smokestack hanging or something, but it was a disaster scene. It wasn't. Once you've seen it, you can care to go back. Pardon? You know, I did for General Electric. I had a job with General Electric. I was in. Told you I was in finance, and I worked on all bids and proposals. And we were working on the JADE program, which is the Japanese Air Defense Equipment Program, which is a program joint venture between Japan and the United States. And Japan invited 3 companies to participate. One was Hughes, one was General Electric, and I think one was the other. I think it was the RCA was the other one. And we had a comrade, and we went with Toshiba Electric. And I spent 6 weeks over there. And what a difference. That was in 64, 65. But then I had my first Japanese cab ride, which is this were kamikaze pilots. I think they were wild. I mean, I know what New York cab drivers are. These guys are even worse than that. Well, I mean, the progress made. Chris was a long time. It was 20 years. I left her in 45 and was back in 65. You wouldn't believe the progress in the building, you know. It was marvelous recovery. First, the United States had the money, and they were putting into it. You know? We didn't get the contract, and we found out later that we didn't get it because one of the companies, I'm not going to tell you which one, but they paid off. But one interesting thing, though, on our proposal, when we went before the Japanese Diet, and they had all the Japanese admirals and Japanese generals that remember their names during the war, and they were part of the inquiry board and reviewing their Japanese air defense equipment system. And I had a lot of questions, technical questions, some about costs and some mostly about technical questions, engineers. We had about 12 people on the trip. 4 or 5 engineers, some marketing people, 2 in finance, and we stayed there for about 5 or 6 weeks.
I have a question for you here. After the war, you're talking about the 1960s, what was the relationship in business would you say, between the United States and Japan?
Very
Because
good.
I know we had everything, all this trade started.
Very good, very good relationship.
And a lot of it in this kind of equipment, we got a lot of
Yeah.
media equipment, cameras,
Well,
electronics.
they were one of our competitors, General Electric. Canon was very good, and Sony, and
Some still.
they were strong competitors. The relationship, they were a major competitor, but as far as political wise, they're fine. But they used to have a National Association of Broadcast show in Chicago and Las Vegas, one of the largest shows in the world. You have all these exhibitors that come there. And we'd have the Japanese teams from Sony and Canon like that because they were getting into the broadcast business. Basically in the camera business. They weren't in the transmitters or antennas, but they were in the camera and studio line.
Consumer stuff, a lot of consumer.
They do have a consumer show, but I was just this is the National Association of Broadcasters. This was a broadcasting show. So this was,
Professional.
yeah. Your customers were your TV stations and radio stations, owners and engineers, and they'd show their new equipment, their new techniques. And
We have Harris Allied in that.
Harris Allied was, see, as I said, GE sold a division of General Electric, which is actually Gates Radio. It's turned to Harris. Yeah, well, Gates was the original forerunner of Harris Corporation.
I didn't know that.
So I had 22 years at General Electric and 15 years at Harris.
Every time I do one of these, I find out more stuff.
Yeah. And Harris is still here, and they're still in the broadcast business.
They donate equipment to Quincy University where we are.
Do they, yeah.
To the radio station
Oh, yeah.
and other.
Oh, yeah,
They
one of the
do.
chief engineers at your Quincy University. Bob Weyerther?
Yeah, I know Bob Weyerther.
Yeah, I know Bob. He was an engineer at
Yeah,
Harris, yeah.
I've known him for several years.
Smart man.
Yeah. It's a good area for
Yeah.
electronics.
Yeah, well,
A lot of industry.
because Harry Savone brought us here, and he was head of the Gates Radio at the time, and then he started his own broadcast electronics, because he had a run-in with Mandel or something, they let him go. He was fired, or he walked, I'm not sure which, but anyway.
You ever know Joe Bonzini?
I knew him, who he was.
He worked at the WGM.
He was an old timer, I knew who he was, yes.
He's a jazz musician, and I teach jazz, so that's how I got to know
Oh, do you?
Joe.
Oh, yeah? All my kids took music through the Quincy High School system. And, one of my daughters got a scholarship at Southern. She was an oboist, played the oboe.
This guy plays trumpet.
Oh,
I'm actually a trumpet teacher. I
Oh.
do this interview stuff, and also he plays trumpet in a jazz band, and he's a good trumpet. Player, and so I didn't even take over your interview there. I was curious about Harry's background a little bit there.
I came here in 1972 with 6 children. 5 went to Quincy High Schools, and one was going to Syracuse. And all of them got out of Quincy High School. 4 went to Western. One graduated from Western and went to Northwestern, got a master's in speech. And so I'm here now. I only have one daughter here. She lives in Mendon. And I have 3 other daughters that live in Seattle. And I have a son who lives in Chicago, Elgin.
They're all over the place.
They're all over the place.
There's a question I got asked. Is there something you got another you want to ask first? There's one I want to get to. Sometimes I like to ask. My dad was in Midway.
Okay.
And I had a lot of conversations with him about what he thought, what his feelings were about the war, the war effort. And I'd like to get some feedback from you. What's your reflection on the wartime then? Maybe compare that a little bit with what we're going through now. How does that compare with what we're going through now? Is there a difference in how that works?
I'm sure there is in technology and, now, my experience is all in the South Pacific, okay? Midway was a major battle, a major turning point, and we won the war. We sank four of their carriers. And that ended Japan, then it just went for the invasion. Technology changed so much, and mostly, I haven't, of course, I've been out of the service. A lot of things I don't know about the service. I don't know too much about the communication line anymore. But, I imagine they still have security units and top secret. But I've been out of that loop. But it certainly made a lot of improvements. But we have a different, right now, we have a different enemy,
Yeah, it's a whole different world. And sometimes I ask that question because we go back to class. These guys are young, and they're not connected very well with that time period.
Right.
So when we hear what you're talking about with your time frame, and they try to compare that with theirs, it's such a difference.
Oh, a different generation.
They need to hear. I think it helps them to hear about that.
I'm amazed at the conditions in Iraq and Iran and Afghanistan, and things are going on there. It's unbelievable. That infantry and the soldiers and the Marines over there, they deserve medals. Because it's like fighting in the streets.
Yeah, sometimes I look at that on the news reporting, and I wonder what the young kids have.
Yeah.
It just looks like it's all sand and rock. I don't even see much what, it's got to be offered.
I was in Laughlin, Nevada last winter for a while, and that's around the Colorado River, near about 90 miles southwest of Las Vegas. And I caught a news bulletin one day that there's a secret base in Nevada. They actually built a small village like Baghdad, and they have a training site there. Or they have native, I don't know who people are there, but they train the soldiers when they go in there to how to observe and how to act in a strange environment, not in a field, but in the city streets. And it's around the sand and the environment.
I've seen, I know what you mean.
Okay.
They try to set it up like it's Iraq.
Right, so they get some experience, so they don't go right in cold, because coming out of a Marine base or Army base and go right over there, they'd be lost. This way they give some fundamental background in that type of camouflage and training and like that.
You didn't really get that kind of training when you went in, though.
No.
Your basic training, and that was about it.
Yeah, we had about 8 weeks of boot camp, or actually 10 weeks of boot camp, and then we with an OGU, which is an outgoing unit, and just waited for the orders, ship orders or land-based orders or whatever. We didn't have any choice at that time. Unless you were had a college degree or something, or you had you put your recommendations on what you like, but when I went in, I was 17. I didn't know what I would like. I'm here.
And I guess this is another one where 17 now is different than 17 then.
Yeah.
And my dad used to say, well, when we were 17, we all wanted to go. We all wanted to go be a part of that.
That was part of it. Yeah. If you were in school and all the kids are going and they're all older than I was, I'm lucky I got out when I was 17, because the kids were coming home, and if you weren't in the service, you were kind of frowned on.
Yeah.
And some guys were 4F, and they felt very bad. I had a couple of friends that I don't know how they played basketball with me on the same team.
4F classification, wasn't that, if you had
One of
bad
them-
foot or
One of them had a heart murmur. They picked up a heart murmur. And that's the last I knew. He's about my age. He's still living, but you know, they didn't want that. It was one of the things that the medical team picked up, and they classified 4F. But that was a disgrace. I mean, it was the stigma put on at that time was unbelievable. You know.
Can you think of any, give us, what kind of questions do you got? Because you're a young guy. What does it sound like? What does it make you think like? What kind of question do you have?
Are you thinking of the service?
I think it was service. I thought about private, job, since the job is on scarce right now. If I try to get a job, I would consider it. So,
Where are you working now?
I wouldn't have to work on that. I have a summer job. I work for public works.
Also,
He's a student.
student.
Full-time student, but he does.
Where do you go? What school do you go to?
You go to Quincy.
Quincy University, okay. I graduated from McCarthy University, Niagara University.
You're a Franciscan university, huh?
Yes, yes. And universities changed a lot too.
Oh, yeah.
I was surprised that the board of directors has so much power at Quincy University.
Oh,
Like
well,
our Niagara University, the president, he called the shots. He wouldn't. The president of this university is a head, but he's restricted in what he can and what he can't do.
yeah, it's all different. I remember the old days when he used to be the president, was the boss,
That was it.
and the board pretty much did what he ever said.
That's right.
Things have changed around.
I have two grandsons. One is doing very well. He went to Vanderbilt. He took out computers technology, and he's doing very well. I got another one that's looking for a job. He just turned 18, and he's working for taking census.
Oh, and that, yeah, I just heard today on the news, they're gonna start knocking on doors of the people who didn't send their census form.
Yeah.
They're gonna start doing
They stopped over and saw us the other day, and they only asked 3 questions.
Yeah, I don't know why it's so simple to do it. I don't know why people wouldn't do it.
I don't know.
I guess people think it's an invasion of their privacy or something. I'm not sure.
That's a good question. I don't know.
Well, Harry, this was a great interview,
Well-
and I want to thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your service and all this information and for helping this guy out.
Thank you.